Hello. And he's back. Okay. We good? We good, Adrian? I just nailed the perfect transition from the song itself. And you jumped off camera. You jumped off camera. I'm just posting on Substack that we went live. It's been a while since I posted. Just gonna drop that there. Yeah. Planning accuracy today.
I don't
Primarily
have one.
talk to. Sorry.
No, I don't have one. No, it's actually an interesting topic. Every software development company or tech-driven company should know that problem is the planning accuracy. And I think the running gag in our industry is that there is actually no accuracy.
The running gag is if we're bad at estimates, let's just get better at estimates. Like that's usually how far people get with planning accuracy.
If we estimate 100%, let's just go with 200 and then we are safe, which is actually no estimation anymore. It's just a wild guessing. Yeah. But actually, you are the specialist. You had probably something going on regarding a speaking gig regarding that. And today we want to go through those things. We want to talk about those things. And you will guide us through some links. So if you decided to show more, that's what we're going to do. So we have an hour to do today. So it will be pretty much exactly 1 hour from now.
Yeah, I think so.
Exactly. I would say we start right in, right?
What background should I go with? Just help me out here for a bit. I think our background is a bit jarring with our camera setup right now. Should we go with the neutral one? This one?
That one.
Was it that one?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. So I'll be sharing my browser every now and then to put everything on stage. The first link that I can share with you is this talk from YouTube. This was my StripeCon session in September. So as you probably noticed, we didn't stream in September. Like there were like 3 weeks, 4 weeks where we either did stream or didn't stream, or that was very sporadic. I was on this conference. It's StripeCon, and I was there talking about planning accuracy, particularly planning accuracy in the context of small businesses. So this is just a quick video. Share screen. There we go. And no audio because I don't want the echo, because I know it always backfires. There we go. So that was the highlight from the conference itself, with a focus on how can you combine hourly billing or alternatives to hourly billing with a quite accurate representation of where your engineering team is headed. Plus, everybody in there is working in some kind of agency. So the audience of the conference was very lean agencies or solopreneurs who are basically offering a mix of a micro SaaS and some kind of service to augment it. Similar to your own business, Adrian. So I created a talk that combines the topics from planning accuracy and then how can you leverage accurate planning and more specifically more accurate delivery of software to command higher prices and how to negotiate higher prices. Because generally projects are priced in such a way that you would assume that it's either going to be hourly, which gives you an incentive to be paid more if you're slower. And if you're going to become more accurate and faster, then that creates an incentive where you, at least for the short term, make a little bit less money. And that's not a very good, that's not something you would celebrate with your team, because then you're making the right step forward, but because you're on this sort of kind of parasitical business model, if you didn't start improving things, it actually gets harder because there's change and you're making less money, which sort of deters everybody from continuing on this path. And then that can create all sorts of local optima for agency style businesses that, you hit them with one crisis or like one one platform going out of business, or one platform becoming less popular, or getting some drama or regulatory concerns, and suddenly poof, a whole ecosystem can be gone in a weekend, as we're now seeing perhaps with WordPress. I'm not sure with the automatic drama, but we're not talking about that today. Maybe on some future episode.
I'm not sure if that is the same topic. It's a little bit different. It is.
So that's
probably
platform.
Different.
That's
topic,
platform
right?
specialization. Yeah, that's quite a different topics. And I was told that apparently on video my kerning for the slides was off. I didn't notice until now, but I got told very quickly
is
that
the
my
clients
kerning.
It's
Yeah.
a ligature.
It looked good on my slides. It looked good on my screen for the presenter. I have no idea that behind me the kerning was off, and all the designers in the audience were just cringing. So yeah, I was also talking a lot regarding the side effects of bad planning, because generally bad planning results in a lot of toxic behavior, whether that's shifting blame for unmet expectations to the development team,
game.
or is this blame game, this finger pointing, this us versus them mentality of, yeah, we did everything we could, but management squeezed us, or yeah, like we would like to deliver it, but engineers always want more time and they want to refactor something. So there's always this sort of pointing
this
fingers.
Is one of my biggest topics right now.
Yeah.
And probably every second video I do is about that. And
can we show your video?
Here, right now, not really, because you mean screen sharing? That's
you had a very good YouTube short that took off this week regarding why are my developers silent, and
I can share
that was touching on a very similar topic about deadlines, and how when they're forced to meet certain deadlines, they shut up, they shy away, and it's also a negative side effect from bad planning accuracy, essentially, right? So somebody in upper management is planning badly. They're incentivizing inaccurate plans, and then they're just pushing through the bad outcome that results of that.
They're planning alone, and that is the big problem.
Exactly. They're planning in isolation, and they're planning through speculation.
Mm-hmm.
You want to share that on screen?
Yeah, but yeah. Wait a second.
Yes, just so people see the thumbnail. Yeah, just so people see the thumbnail, and so that they can sort of identify with what's going on.
Share screen.
Share the screen, and then when yours is on, I think when you click yours, mine will go away.
Ta-da!
Yeah, awesome.
I'll do it like this, and you see.
Yeah, that's a good format.
That's the one, and actually, that's a quite interesting thing, and it's all about why developers actually are pretty much silent. And that does have a lot of root causes. One is, of course, that the developers themselves don't try to change anything. That is often the case as well. So it's not only the bad project manager or business person, right? But the business person actually don't really care, because they only care to actually get the business running. So they focus on making promises and then go to the developers and tell them when things needs to be done. I actually see that every week in my own environment still, but I can say I've probably at least 50-60% of the people I'm working with are now partners and not clients anymore. And once you have reached that, it's actually working. This is the reason why I actually don't want to work anymore in environments and with clients who don't accept that, because in the end, it doesn't really bring you forward. It doesn't bring you anything for the product. So you will suffer, and probably we as the developers, the actual engineers, will be the blamed persons, because incompetency, all those kind of things will be what they basically tell that we are in that moment, or actually incompetent, right? But it is not an the only thing which is probably a sign of incompetence is not to speak up when we clearly see we're running against a wall. So that is maybe the only thing which we should do. And of course, in a mature way, we as developers, as a team, as an entire team, not as a single individual, should stand up and say, we can't do the impossible. So we can do it in time, but that means that we actually take shortcuts. We won't reach quality, and next time it will become worse and worse. It's a downward spiral. Do you want to have that? So that is the mature way of starting that one. That's a pretty interesting video. You can take a look at it. There will be probably a follow-up for this because I had so much response on all channels about this video. And yes, by the way, I'm starting a YouTube channel. I will announce that this evening on LinkedIn as well. So take a look then. Will be interesting. Yeah.
So the reason I wanted to talk about planning accuracy particularly. So planning accuracy, where did I find the term? I found it mentioned first by Linear B, because they introduced it in their DORA metrics report. So Linear B is a software engineering intelligence platform that is sort of trying to put together DORA metrics, some level of space metrics and surveys, with a little bit of HR, a little bit, and Jira, essentially, right? So they're connecting together your deployment pipeline with your ticketing pipeline, and they're trying to sort of automatically measure things so that you don't need to use third-party tools outside of the scope of what the developers are using. That's like super simplified. Then it goes way deeper depending on your needs. Enterprises then probably have a lot of different plugins that they want to focus on, or regulatory concerns that they might want to track. But planning accuracy was really interesting because it spoke about this idea of, to me, it's appeared as a very good proxy metric to how prepared a company is for continuous delivery. Because I can look at a company and say, are you doing continuous delivery or not? And they might say, yeah, we have a CI/CD pipeline, but we're not integrating continuously, right? So they have like less than minimum, and then they've stopped. And if I now try to get them to adopt continuous delivery practices, chunk-based development, test automation, like very heavy test coverage, TDD, they might find that to be a way too high cliff, like a learning curve, too much at once, very overwhelming, and they might already be feeling the cultural influences, the negative cultural influences of bad planning accuracy in the past, which is toxicity, burnout, disengagement. So now you have a team that's burnt out, disengaged, slightly toxic, isolated, lacking transparency, and now you want to do something that sort of requires all of those to work well together. And I found that there was a huge gap between teams who said, we want to do CD, but maybe not right this week. And I figured, well, what can we do this week? And I found that focusing on planning accuracy first was a very good first week, second week activity to get them onto this treadmill of actually showing incremental progress on the continuous delivery journey. That also gave them like a sense of a productivity boost, at least to the leaders. Because otherwise, if the team is burnt out, the developers are actually the group that resists continuous delivery the most. You would think that the developers would want it, but if the developers are burnt out, then they will resist any kind of change, even if it's well-meaning, right? So if a burnt-out development team, a disengaged development team, they won't want TDD, even if it's good for them. They won't want less measurement, even if it's good for them. They won't want more measuring, even if it's good for them. So it has this sort of latency period of it'll get worse before it gets better, and they just want zero change. So I created this program, calling it Eureka Planning Accuracy. I'm sort of demoing it right now. It's a 5-day email course on Gumroad where I'm running you through a week, where I'm sort of helping you explore, okay, how can you check your own planning accuracy? And what is it that makes it better? And really, this concept is not so much about estimations or hashtag no I hate the term hashtag no estimations because it's defined by something it doesn't do. No estimations is actually ticket counting. It has nothing to do with not estimating. It has everything to do with ticket counting, which is very similar to what I'm proposing here, but at least I'm using the name that describes what it is, not what it isn't. So what this exercise allows you to do is to see really, okay, am I prone to over-promising? Am I prone to just setting up my team for failure from the get-go?
Mhm.
Are our sprints, if we have them, badly set up? What happens when the sprints don't go according to plan? How soon into the sprint that doesn't go according to plan do we act? And sort of the day 3, day 4, those are the main days where you have to do course correction. And then I sort of help you figure out, okay, will you do it? If you won't do it, why not?
Can you
What?
give a practical example? So you are just joining a team. The team is
Mhm.
overburdened. They are actually resistant. They are hesitant,
Yep.
reluctant. They don't want to, and they actually don't like you. But the project manager said, "Hey, we have this new guy, this new coach,"
Yeah.
and they are like, great, fine."
Mhm.
So what? How would you act in that moment? Because that is
So
the situation we see so often.
yeah, so the first thing is I would be shadowing with the team just to build trust with them as a technical person, because they don't want a consultant, being a smartass. I just want to level with them. If they have a shitty job to do that they don't want to do themselves, I do it with them. I pair with them. If something's not Dockerized, I help them Dockerize it. If something's not testable, I help them make it testable very quickly, just to build trust with them. So I pair with them. I
So the low
socialize
hanging
with them.
fruits, actually.
I do the low-hanging fruits with them just to build trust. And my first week focus is with the leader. And this is what I do privately with the leader. I tell them, you do everything you do publicly the way you do it. There's not going to be any changes to how you do the roadmap. There's not going to be any changes to how you do Jira. I just want you and me to have a little commitment challenge. I just want you to take what's in Jira, take the release plan and commit, okay, this is the sprint. This is a week. The release date is Friday. Or Monday, if it's from Monday to Monday. I don't care if if they're hesitant about deploying on Friday, or if it's Wednesday to Wednesday, it doesn't matter. There's a release date, there's a release plan, and what I am asking commitment for is that let's set up such a plan such that we agree what the intermediate milestones are, right? So I don't want to talk about accuracy in a team that does 100% at the last day. That's silly, because that's not actionable.
Mhm.
So ideally, I'm helping them regiment together a plan where ideally every day, or maybe every 2 days, we can go from 0% to 40% to 60% to 100%. So that then we know what on time across the milestones looks like.
Mhm.
Because then on the milestone, they can check, are we on time? No. Okay, escalate. How do we escalate? Then I teach them what escalation procedures are available. And then I teach them not to use it anymore. Then I incentivize them to ask the team to escalate so that they self-regulate rather than requiring a policeman in the engineering manager. That's step 1. And then step 2 is if they can't actually show incremental progress throughout the week, that means that their byproducts are not releasable. And that has to do with how we score things. And I run them through the exercise. So an example is the leader. I tell them if something is merged, like ready to be deployed, if it was reviewed, done, tested, and ready to deploy, but it wasn't deployed, that gets good. If it was deployed, that gets a very good on a ticket. If it was just done but not reviewed, that gets a 0. If it was not done and not tested and not reviewed, it also gets a 0. If it was deployed on staging and then they figured out that there was a bug, that also gets a 0. So I'm defining what quality looks like that can be measured, and everything else we give a 0, so that then we can figure out, okay, in which processes is it reliable, and in which processes is it not reliable, so that they can get a feeling for what kind of promises am I making throughout the week that have strict guarantees and which do not have strict guarantees. Because sometimes they say, yeah, it might be done, it might not be done. We'll know once it's on staging.
Yeah.
So then we can break that down from a large, silly guarantee into 2 smaller, stronger guarantees. And that's what I would then want to use this exercise with, so that they can score themselves and say, okay, which zeros surprised you that they were zeros? Because those are the candidates that you need to break up into smaller chunks, because otherwise you can't measure progress on them. And that's primarily just for them, the leader, for them to have self-awareness about, oh, so even that promise is too large. Even that promise is unreliable. And sometimes they're incentivizing developers to overpromise or to be safe and sort of make the estimate larger with smaller scope, which is a huge detriment to the team because it just makes the 0, 0, 0, 100% tail and the lag larger, which makes it even harder for the leader to maintain situational awareness. And they might not have awareness that this is actually a bad thing for the longevity, for the sort of the long-term health of the team. Because then it incentivizes bad planning accuracy. Bad planning accuracy leads to burnout. Burnout leads to toxicity, and then lack of communication, lack of trust, and then you come back to bad planning accuracy, and then people don't want to do continuous delivery, right? So I'm trying to help them break this cycle with this exercise. So that's one of the things. Also, another thing you can... you got any comments here, Adrian? I can take the screen down because I'm going to change the screen to a different one in a bit.
We have a question. We should go for.
We have a question, yeah. Oh, also we have a comment. We had a pre-comment from one of Brian's buddies. Was it Ryan? Ryan, right?
Ryan, then.
Yeah, Ryan Savage couldn't make it, but he had a good question. I will try to pull it up. How is this different from a sprint burned out? That's a very good question because topologically speaking, it is very similar. It is different in two ways. Generally, a sprint burn down, you would be looking as a lagging indicator, right? So you would be looking at the sprint burn down chart, and then it sort of speculates when you'll hit 0. I'm not interested in when you'll hit 0. I'm trying to show the leader which ticket was surprisingly too large. Right, so the problem with the sprints burn down chart is that it is not actionable. It just shows you it's going to take longer than expected. What I'm showing the leader with this exercise is that we are immediately interrupting workflow when we encounter a surprise. Because we want to get it down to a cadence where it ideally every day. Very good teams do it, every couple hours. Lunch breaks up the day into 2 halves, and maybe there's like multiple pairing sessions going on there. So like 2-3 increments, that can be ideal, like a few hours. But ideally, like most normal teams would do every day or every 2 days in a week. The difference with the burn down chart is that the burn down chart, if the team is burnt out, then the burn down chart will be flat in the beginning of the sprint, which doesn't tell us anything. And it will be different here because we're setting expectations with the leader of which of the tickets do you expect to be done on which day. Right? The burn down chart in a sprint says, well, everything will be done by the end of the sprint. And that's not actionable until the end of the sprint. That's not useful for us. Right? So what I'm doing with them is I'm assuming, well, you have 10 items on the week. That means every day we need to finish 2. Because if not, then on one of the days we need to finish 3. And then we can do 1 in 1 day. Or if you do 0 and 0, then now you suddenly need to do 3, 3, 3. But the problem is that in at least in sprint topology, at least in Scrum fall, right? Doing 0, 0 on the first 2 days, and then scope increasing and pulling some tickets out, and sort of manipulating the burn down trajectory to sort of hit the right date correctly. That is still a win. In my book, that is already a lost team. That is already a team that is vastly inaccurate and has, no hope of course correcting towards working in smaller increments, continuous delivery, etc. Right? So the cadence to which Scrum measures progress is too slow. They require you to burn the entire budget to take action. And even then, you can't take action because the burn down chart is not actionable. So you need to do a full retrospective to create insights, or even to context dump, to create insights, to even consider and suggest actionable,
It's very rigid for an agile system.
It's very rigid. It's already too late. You already missed the deadline. You already spent the budget. If you spent the whole week building something that didn't get deployed, well, that code is still there. Now you've created all the inventory. So what I'm getting them down to is that when they fail, when we find the point when they're off course, off release plan, we interrupt the release plan, and I ask them to make their next release plan smaller. That's one of the course corrections, because they're doing this challenge with me because obviously they'll go off course very soon.
But when you go for when you want to go for real continuous delivery, you actually start to go in iterations away from Scrum in that moment.
Yeah, so
that's what you actually.
If they're doing, half of my clients do Scrum, do some form of sprints. They don't do Scrum, but they do some form of sprints.
Kanban-like sprints.
Kanban-like, and maybe their workflow is tied in. Maybe their release schedule is tied into the sprint having a name. I don't want to disrupt their workflow too early. This is week 1, week 2 in an engagement. So I don't want to disrupt the workflow. I just tell them, if you guys use sprints, you use sprints. But for the exercise, you and I take what's in the sprint and we play this game. So that I don't disrupt the normal workflow, because I don't want even more resistance. But that's a great question. So the big difference is that when you fail a sprint, the next course of action is you plan the next sprint. I don't do that in this challenge. I don't let the week finish. We interrupt it, and I ask them to do a shorter sprint. So if they failed with a release plan that had 8 items for 5 days, if they fail on day 2, I ask them to do a 2-day release plan with 3 items. And then if that's 0, then I ask them to do a 1-day release plan with 1 item. And if they fail that, then I ask them to do a very small piece of one very small item in 1 day. And if they keep failing that, then we just get to one line of code changed in 3 hours, and we call that a ticket. And because the problem is, if we're going off course, if we're not going according to plan, I ask them to shrink, and we keep shrinking until they are accurate on their promise. And I usually do this with the team. When I can, when I do have access to their code base, I usually do 2 PRs in the first few weeks. One PR is a bug. It's a silly bug. Like I can enter -1 somewhere in a number function and it throws an exception that it shouldn't. It won't show up in production normally, but it's a bug. It's a bug that can be fixed. So that I fixed. It's a silly bug fix and a typo. I might fix a typo in a variable. And I check how long that takes to get into main. Does it need review? Will somebody ignore it because it's trivial and they feel like they're too busy? Because I'm trying to figure out, is it going to take them 5 minutes? Are they going to delete it? Are they going to hassle me about it? Are they going to merge it? Is it going to take 2 days? Is somebody going to do it last minute at the release? Is somebody going to hotfix it? I'm trying to figure out, if I give them a 1 line of code change, how long does it take to get into mainline? As a completely separate experiment, as I'm shadowing the team.
Okay, and what? So that was now the explanation for actually getting to this point where you actually can start to measure the unit, right? So you know,
I want to know
unit 1, how fast you are. With
my outcome with the leader is that they need to understand what is the minimum possible stable guarantee promise that they can give for somebody to say, baseline to say, if something takes 5 lines of code in one file and we know exactly what it is, what is the minimum amount of time that takes to get out to production to a real user?
Okay, and what now? So we have now still the business pressuring with an entire feature, which would be something like maybe 2 or 3 8 story point things, right? Probably roughly
Not
estimated.
estimating, but they can do estimations.
Exactly, but they still have that on mind, and you are there now. You know what is actually the performance, the pace of the team. What can the team, let's say, as a minimum baseline do? So what is the next step to actually get to make the business people happy, or what do you want to change in order to get the process working?
So generally what this leads to is that the first few sprints slow down. But what I can do with the team is that I can then use this small unit, if we measure the small unit, I can get them to do a test coverage or a quick fix or a quick benign refactor very quickly out of production.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the main promise to the business. It's like, hey, there was a small change, we found an opportunity, and we actually rolled it out to production. Because normally they would expect, like a 2-week, it goes into the backlog, it'll go into the sprint next week, it'll not be finished in the same sprint, it'll roll over to the next sprint, and then it'll be reviewed, then it'll be merged, then in week 3 it'll be deployed. If I could just get them something that's top of mind to them, because I probably had a meeting with them prior to the engagement, what's the top priority for them, like in that month? If we can get some small increment of change, maybe something visual, especially in a week or in a day, that is already like a quick, a life sign that, hey, this team actually can work very fast in small steps, but we just need the right configuration of incentives and hurdles removed, impediments removed. And that's sort of what I'm doing with the first few weeks with the team. It's interesting that you brought up story points. I just want to mention that very briefly, because sometimes story points actually can become the main impediment. Because let's say I have a ticket that is 2 story points.
Yeah.
And it wasn't deployed in a day. And 2 developers are working on it. Now the problem is that there are two problems with this. Either our definition of a point is off, or it wasn't 2 points.
The latter, definitely, because most
it wasn't
people
2 points,
understand
so it's
the
4
same
points,
regarding
right?
points.
So it's 4 points. So when I take this 2-story ticket after day 2, if I split it up, and let's say what was done yesterday, the 50% that was done yesterday, I make that a separate story, but now how many points do I give it? So we thought it was 2. It's actually 4 by the looks of it. I split it in half, and now what I did yesterday was 2. So what I'm working on today is also 2. But now I just increase the scope of the sprint.
You still have the disconnect between everything.
And it's completely disconnected from reality, because then as I'm making progress, the sprint keeps increasing in the amount of points it's doing, which is completely silly and extremely unintuitive.
But you can send the developers to 2 overhours, so what's the problem?
No, but the problem is
I was joking,
I can even
don't do that.
no, but the problem is the story points deter splitting.
Yeah.
The story points disincentivize splitting. So, for example, if a story has 1 story point, and I ask them, well, this was obviously too complicated, can we split it up into 3 separate tickets? And they ask, well, how many points do we give each ticket? And then they want to do something
that
weird.
Story points is nothing you can see as a standalone thing. So a story
Exactly.
and let's say a single ticket is in concurrency with so many other things, and you have a fixed amount of absolute budget and headcount to actually get it done, and that's the problem. So you play a guess game. So it's not really engineering what you do, because in real engineering you plan and then you execute, and the thinking is probably coming from that age that you try to get something similar into software development, but software development can be very off. There's so many unknowns there, right? That you basically cannot do that. So it is still interesting for me, maybe for the audience as well. Now we have discussed that you try to actually, what's actually the typical agile approach, the real agile approach, you try to get it down to understand how fast can we actually work, what can we do. Then the second aspect, to start to communicating about this, so create transparency, so that you build up trust and credibility, so that the business person actually stop giving you deadlines in form of story points to actually get things done, and either they just wait and they know that something happens, and we hope for it's basically a little bit based on trust, right? But this is the last point is the interesting one, because this is where the most tension in all companies actually happen, because the business people, so when you have a product, a SaaS product, and the SaaS product isn't released yet, the tension isn't there, because the only people you need to talk to are the actual business people inside your own company. But as soon as you have external people, like investors, like users, like large enterprises in the B2B sector, and they start to provide you some deadlines, and then you try to start to estimate to meet those deadlines. And this is, I think, out of my perspective, the biggest issue everywhere. And the developers are actually, end of food chain. And that's a little bit like, the wrong end, actually. And that would be interesting for me now, how you get this methodology you actually implemented there, or you coach there, how you get that to doing that basically, or to mitigate that tension problem on the business level.
So we don't keep this planning accuracy game. As I said, it's just a gateway. Planning, imagine it like a starter in a 5-course meal. It's the warm-up. The point of doing this planning accuracy game is to get them in a mindset of seeking a smaller batch size.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to create the right environment for their team to work in a smaller batch size when their normal batch size was a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And we try to get that down. Can we work in a 1-hour batch? Can we work in a 30-minute batch? Can we work in a 1-day batch? Can we work in a 2-day batch? What do those things look like? And each different cadence of batch size will have different problems. The 30-minute batch size will have a locality problem of whoever is not on the call right now isn't involved. So maybe they are used to being in the loop through some code review because it's so slow, so everybody gets a chance to see it. Now they got not in the loop. So now this incentivizes more pairing. But if they're not doing pairing, then they'll be left out of the loop. That solves some problems, that creates new problems. Okay, so that's that situation. What about a 2-day batch size? Well, a 2-day batch size, the pair that is pairing with TDD right now, it's too slow for them. Whereas with the business who wants to do a hotfix real quick for some landing page, it's too slow for them, right? Whereas with the team who wants to deploy something onto staging first and test something and see it working in production so they don't have to commit to any unit tests, hard unit tests or integration tests in their legacy code system they don't know how to refactor code in, it's good for them because it's slow enough so that they can go safely and 5 people can see it and 6 people can see it and 7 people can see it and the QA can see it and then we can be pushed back and then there's no pressure. And to them, it's comfy, right? So that everybody gets to experience what the different batch sizes feel like, and then they can pick one. Then they can say, okay, you know what? Like what we've been doing is actually very chaotic and too slow. Let's try to commit to regimented 3-day batches, right? So we do a 3-day batch, we do a release, we do planning, and then we do another release. That works very well because generally teams have like 3 different planning, extreme programming. Actually, the extreme programming side of Agile talks about this a lot. I didn't see this mentioned anywhere else in Agile, Scrum. There was this mention of an inner loop, an outer loop, but I think it really got lost in the whole project management sphere. But it's this idea of the most important artifact for planning is a release plan. Because the problem with a sprint is that there are tickets in a list. And your team needs to be working as a team.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go solving issue number 2 until issue number 1 is deployed.
Mm-hmm.
That is the only workflow in which that kind of methodology works. If the team just looks at the list and picks up the easy stuff and just goes, I'm going to do A, you're going to do C, you're going to do 12, you're going to do 15, and then they just start working randomly throughout the week, that doesn't make sense. Right? So the point of the release plan is not to say, here's our sprint.
Mm-hmm.
But the point of the release plan is to say, we have 5 tickets. This is on Monday, this is on Tuesday, this is on Wednesday, this is on Thursday, this is on Friday. If we were wrong about Monday, then these 4 are affected. If we are wrong about Wednesday, then only these 2 are affected, as long as the first 2 were okay. That's kind of the idea. And then you can then play that. And Ryan even asked about the Monte Carlo simulation. That is worth Monte Carlo simulating. It's worth Monte Carlo simulating, okay, did we get the order right? If we mess up on day 1, how does that affect the entire project? What is the most risky thing? What is the most stable thing? What is not worth doing Monte Carlo simulations on is the release estimate. I think this ticket is 1 day. Maybe it's 1 day, maybe it's half a day, maybe it's 2 days. Because what you want to simulate is changing the order of things, the configuration of things. How does it impact risk? How does it impact the final release? If I cut scope and I remove ticket 3, is that still a viable release increment? No, because obviously that's the UI, like that we can't remove. Okay, so we put it first. Like that's the game you want to be playing, not the size, but the order of things. And if the sizes of the wrong order are not matching with reality, then you interrupt the entire flow to give stakeholders a chance to reprioritize to get the order right, because the size isn't. That's sort of where I'm going with this exercise.
I'm
You
preparing
can also look
something.
at the.
I would like
Sorry?
to. I would like to share something here.
Yeah,
Test
go for it.
something. And that is this one here. I'm sending the link into the channels. Of course, LinkedIn does always have its special way to do that.
Okay.
But I want to show
Oh, you did
it.
Slido. Awesome.
Yeah, I did.
Does
Share
that show
screen.
up on the screen as a QR code?
Yeah, it does. Wait a second. I just try to find the correct window. There it is.
Awesome.
And we want to try to use that a little bit more. That was actually just a talk thing right now. So please give us some insights about how do you actually have that in your teams? Like, are you actually... What is attention? That's the wrong question. I just... No. What? That question is actually interesting for us. Are your estimations regularly off, right? That is about the planning accuracy. Let us know if it's about in Scrum, outside of Scrum. Oh, who was that, right?
Nice, it's working. Thank you, tester.
And no, it's accurate or other, then let us know in the chat. So we leave that on now so you can see a little bit what's going on there.
Awesome.
And yeah, just wanted to support that a little bit. So go ahead.
I just want to finish off because there are 3 different planning rituals that you need to do as a team: the stakeholder planning, the strategic plan, the release plan, and the design of the software. Most of what you should be doing is the design of the software and the strategic plan. Now, if you as a team do not have strategic insight because you're siloed, that's going to be a challenge for the entire organization, especially your leader, the person I'm coaching usually. Right? So for the team, then, in absence of either the strategic plan is very good and it's not changing often, then the remainder of the effort, if it's necessary, should be devoted to the release plan once the design has been done. Right? So how do most people plan? They go in, they show designs, they have a ticket, they describe the ticket, maybe they even have some acceptance criteria, acceptance tests in there, and then they show it to the developers, and then they ask, okay, without developing anything, how long is this going to take? That's not a release plan, that's not strategic planning, and that is not designing. That is silly, that kind of meeting, and it's very draining. And that is what I see a lot of Scrum teams do, right? So what you should ideally be doing is say, I can't plan this, but tomorrow I can release a prototype, and the prototype will then give me a measure for what a unit of scale in this kind of project is, and then I can give you a better release plan. And then once you have that release plan, you can make a much better plan out of that. Because I will be forced to design something. That's how extreme programming teams work. They ensemble, they say, okay, we encountered a problem. We don't know enough about this without actually coding. But what we can do is we can design just the part that touches the interface. We can design just the part that touches the third-party API. We can spike it for 2 hours, see what we can come up with, and try to release it. If it's a silly prototype that can make a button move and somebody's account balance go up, that is already a good enough prototype to make further assessments on, so that they can say, oh, that was actually really complicated. We just scraped the surface. This was like the easiest part of the API. The next ones will be definitely much harder than this, and that you can already use to formulate a much better release plan. And then you use the release plan that you constantly validate as you go, because you're designing, to then formulate a more accurate plan. But the point is that you don't plan the week. You say, I can't plan, but what I will do is I will interrupt the meeting now and we will go design together and we'll try to release something today. Because there's no point planning something if it requires knowledge we don't have.
Mm-hmm.
So you can build that knowledge by releasing a prototype, by releasing, a Hello. If you don't have any code and this is your greenfield project, you can release a Hello World project. At the very least, you can release, how far away are you from first deployment? You can measure that. Maybe you'll finish it, or if you're don't finish it, and that was really important information. And that is
But
an
all
extra.
in all, this topic for me is more about getting into an environment with your company and your development cycle to actually not continuously measure and estimate. It is more like
to not speculate. Yes, to not speculate.
Let's get things done and do what we can with what we have done already.
Yes.
Trust that this is actually what we really were able to get done. That's very important.
Mm-hmm.
So because otherwise it's a typical thing when you do 2 weeks of development, there is a lot of inventory built up. No one knows what's going on.
Yes.
And then you stand there and last day and you say, it takes 3 days longer. So you have the entire inventory against you right now because you haven't delivered anything. The trust is low and you actually have no credibility in that moment. And that gets worse with every time you do that way. But
absolutely,
it is vice versa if you do it right, if you do it differently, because then everyone sees, okay, you deploy something, you have done maybe just 80% of what we just estimated in the beginning, but it's there, it is usable, and that is what is interesting.
And what's even more interesting is that outcome wise, what I'm doing is I'm de-risking working with the team. Right, so there is risk involved with the product itself. Maybe we build something that the users won't like. That's okay. Give the team permission to fail, but plan to win. That is playing with the risk profile of the product itself. But then if you're inaccurate in your planning, or rather you never do release plans because you only estimate stuff. Mm-hmm. You play this Scrum poker game, but you never really do release plans and you never really do data-driven spikes or ensembles for explicit design in order to estimate, in order to make a better release plan. Then you're constantly speculating, which means that it is very risky to work with this team. When it is building software in this manner. Right? So now you have the risk of working with the team and the risk of working with the product. So now the risk of the entire project compounds. Right? So what we're actually working on with the leader is de-risking working with the team. Right? So we're making the team's decision-making process less risky. Or at least they make their risks transparent. They manage their risk. They say, I don't have any information. I don't have any situational awareness about this. So I will go pair now with a few people who has responded to the request for advice, for the request for pairing. And we're going to go build a proof of concept or some kind of, change in that ecosystem and see how long that takes us. And see if we even understand what's going on. See if we can even refactor something. See if we can test cover something. See if we can run the deployment pipeline. And then use that as a baseline to say, well, it's going to be at least this much, plus whatever code changes we need to do along the way, plus the design, plus the complexity of testing it, plus the validation process of getting it out to the user and asking for feedback. Yep. Right? So once you get the core activity down to a really, really small core that gets more than one person involved, then the stability of the team, the cadence of the team, the chaos of the team stabilizes. And then working with the team becomes less risky, so that you can go from lagging indicators to leading indicators. Because estimating projects is a lagging indicator. You estimate something, and then you're looking at the burn down chart, and that's a lagging indicator. You need the day to pass to look back at the chart. Whereas what we want to be doing is we want to be looking at leading indicators. I have done X, Y, and Z today. I can see that X, Y, and Z is released. So I have now evidence that this is possible. So I am now updating my release plan. And that release plan is a change in the lagging indicator. How the release plan will be changing throughout the week is the main measure of progress. Because what I want to be measuring is, no, the team said it's going to be these 8 things by the end of the week. on Tuesday, they course corrected and said, no, it's going to be these 4 things by Friday and then the 6th thing by next Tuesday. That is a very good measure of progress, because then somebody who's watching that can see, okay, they encountered some hurdles, they cut scope according to strategic interest. They didn't cut anything that the stakeholders really cared about. And then that promotes trust into the team. That makes them being in charge less risky. Another thing you can look at if you're in the audience and you want a little bit more insight, if I can take over the screen, Adrian, is minimumcd.org. And if you go directly to the subpage called Starting the Journey, it's /journey. Because this highlights to some degree what I've been talking about. And it really helps you solidify, okay, can you do continuous delivery in your organization? No. Okay, why not? Is there a blame game going on? Are there like criticality issues? Are you stuck on support? Are you stuck on change advisory boards? Are you stuck on pull requests? Mm-hmm. So it can help you solve, okay, what is your main challenge? Is it an integration challenge? Okay, do your code reviews take too long? Does it require too many people? Are the code reviews bad? Are the code reviews not actionable? Once it's actionable, is it still not better? Are tests being deferred? Are tests flaky? Are you afraid to remove tests? Are you afraid to add tests? Maybe you don't know how to write them. Maybe you don't know how to write them in this particular code base. Maybe the tasks are too big. That is what we talked about today.
Yes.
Maybe the stories are too big and it's not quite clear when they're done. Or at least, like the final bit is clear when it's done, but we don't know what done looks like in incremental steps.
Yes.
Or the team might be pushing for something that is dysfunctional.
If you have a task which would take 5 days because you are actually too lazy to cut it or slice it into smaller pieces, then of course it is something different. What done is done, right? Then if you just have it, for example, sliced into, let's say, 10 pieces, so you would have at least every day 2 dones or something like that. That is a total different mindset. It's a total different culture, and it's about progress, right? So we were really talking about progress, and then you can say, hey, maybe it takes a little bit longer, but it doesn't really matter because you don't have the plan for next week. It is clear that, okay, we will work next week still on that because we aren't fast enough. But that's okay because that is reality. So we're talking about reality and not pressuring people to get something done, which is actually not doable, else then, pushing people into overtime. And that is when the team leads or the managers come in with, hey, pizza today, something went wrong, right? It is not great if you have that pizza thing going on in the evening.
So we mentioned Linear B at the beginning of the stream. They were one of the first ones to use planning accuracy in an enterprise context. And to them, planning accuracy does mean a very specific thing. And it is very Scrum motivated, Scrum inspired. I just wanted to mention Linear B because Luca Rossi from Refactoring, they're pairing up with Linear B, and they are working on a survey together. And they're working on a survey about how everybody's measuring productivity, how are they using metrics, etc. So if you want to get into that, this is a great article to get you started, or at least you can get involved in a way that might make you feel included into the research. And there's something similar going on that the lead dev organization did last year. I just want to show you the report from last year. And it doesn't want to open it right now. It only opens from the email, I see. So if you Google up the lead dev engineering team performance report for 2023, it'll also show you a summary of how engineering teams have been using engineering metrics in the last year, and they're just now starting. If you're on the lead dev, it's the pink organization, the pink logo. If you're on their newsletter, they'll also invite you to be part of their 2024 survey. But what you need to know about this lead dev survey, I'm opening up in my email. Hang on, I just need to go to secure browser. What you need to know, actually, they removed it. Like it worked. It worked before the stream, and now it's gone. They took it down. I don't know. The point was, everybody seems to be unanimously using cycle time.
Yeah.
Cycle time as their main measurement for work. The problem is cycle time is the fuzziest metric to measure. So even though it might be useful, the cycle time is the metric where the absolute numbers will vary the most from team to team. So it is only useful for individual progress for a particular team. But hey, how is that trend? Is it getting better, or is
as
it
long as
worse?
the work isn't changing? So if you have a team working
Yeah,
on legacy
and
software,
the work
you
needs to
can't
be
throw away the cycle time at all. This doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and the work needs to be in a very uniform product, right? So the team needs to be oriented around the product. If it's like 10 different forms of activities, one time they're training an LLM, the other day they're building a landing page, another time they're going out building conference booths, then cycle time will be all over the place.
Yes.
So what I've been talking about here is primarily to use how the release plan is changing and how open leadership is to changing the release plan, and how self-aware the team is to changing the release plan as the main leading indicator to how well this project will go. If something is going wrong and you're scoring 0, so, to use, what is the gentleman's name? To use Prajumna's comment about how is this different from a sprint burn down. If your sprint burn down is flat, or if your sprint burn down is naively following what seems to be a too conservative line, and nobody is course correcting, aborting the sprint, canceling the sprint, changing the order of the tickets, pulling people off of trivial tickets and forming an ensemble team, forming a micro team around the highest priority thing that is late, that was misestimated. If that's not happening, then you're not going to be on time by the time you run out of budget, and by the time you run out of sprint budget, or by the end of the deadline. So that's the main lesson here. You can use
how are we in time because of we are done.
We're exactly on 1 hour, so we can wrap here if you want.
For me, actually, it's necessary, but you can go on if you like. But I'm not sure if we are through with the topic, so it was your topic.
I got all the links, so I dropped some links in the private chat, and all of them are visited, so I got through all of them. How many comments is this? I don't see the absolute. Oh, it's 5?
5.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I would expect from a poll. It's not about accuracy. It's not about the accuracy of the estimates. When I say that your plan is accurate, the plan is not accurate because you estimate accurately. The plan is accurate when you change the plan, when you get to the point where inaccuracies happen. That's the whole point. Right? So if I tell you I'll arrive at 3 p.m., if I can split up that journey into 30-minute milestones, if I'm 15 minutes late for the first milestone, I can already call you that I'm going to be at least 15 minutes late. I might make up that time, but now that is a different bet than already knowing that I'll be at least 15 minutes late. That's the idea, right? So the point isn't that we're estimating correctly at the beginning of the journey. The point is how are we communicating updates as we're figuring out that we're on time, ahead of schedule, behind schedule as we go, and primarily not changing the estimates of the remaining tickets, but changing their order, right? So if we are wrong and now our delivery is slower, do we want to keep the order that we agreed to? Because usually the projects are bucketed. This can happen at the beginning. This needs to happen just before the end, and then fill in the blanks. because usually stuff in the middle will go out, not in the end. So the more late you are, the more you need to focus on the thing that you said, oh, that thing at the end definitely needs to happen. And if you put it in the end of the sprint, well, then somebody now needs to have situational awareness to squeeze out things from the middle. So the things that are non-negotiable have to happen, even though the sprint is sort of shrinking, towards itself. Like it's looking to implode. And that's very difficult to visualize.
I just participated because when we estimate, we are actually off in general.
Yeah, but the estimate can be useful. Like it doesn't need to be accurate.
It is more for business reasons in general to say that is the rough idea, but very often we are off and everyone knows that, and it's totally fine. It's just that we all have a very rough agreement of what's actually going on. But it's when engineering quality and outcome quality is not allowed to suffer because of that estimation. So the estimation isn't as strong as the NFRs are, and this is the reason why I just participated. I just tested it with a
For example, one of the things that I'm teaching teams to communicate about, especially in event storming or event modeling sessions with their subject matter experts and product people, is I'm also estimating, but I'm teaching them, hey, look, as a layman to your product, as a consultant who's just coming in as a coach, I can definitely guarantee that the first 2 releases of anything user-facing will be underwhelming. The first 2. Because the first release will just run into technical issues. The second release will barely scratch the surface for user validation. And then the third release, we have a good chance of actually nailing it. So if the first 2 releases will generally be unsatisfactory, let's make them smaller. Let's bring them closer on the timeline to now. And let's increase their risk factor. Because if they're going to be unsatisfactory either way, then let's run experiments in the first 2 to nail number 3. So then let's aim to get release number 3 to hit the deadline, not release number 1, which requires us to work in smaller steps and limit scope, at least to the point where if we scoped way too small, that means that we will get the desired outcome way ahead of schedule. And that is also a good outcome. And then we can have another meeting session, which I don't think anybody will feel bad about the project being ahead of schedule. And then we need to now discuss what to do next.
Okay. But next week we will have a Halloween session, which means that we will both go as project manager and scrum master. So we can
describe the situations where all of these situations go terribly wrong.
Don't know what we're actually going to do then, but it will be scary. So actually,
stories.
Yeah. Okay. So that was actually an interesting session. I was most of the time listening because I was interested in how you actually solved that. Yeah. So let us know what you think in the comments. Looking forward for the next week. And stay tuned, I would say.
Yeah. Thank you,
and
Adrian.
Thanks for participating.
And thanks for the Slido thing. Thanks for experimenting with that. That was cool.
Should use that more often, but present it better. We've done it last time in another stream, embedding it into the background. That was actually the
embedding it into the background. So like we could have it somewhere up here and
just with a smartphone, it's a little bit complicated because you need to have 3 or 4 mirrors in order to scan the code when you're watching via your smartphone. It's way easier to go to slido.com and type in the number actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you could also put the number in the QR code, or adjacent to it, and
it's probably the QR code is probably a Slido plus a parameter with a code, but you can do it manually on slido.com as well.
Cool.
That's actually for conferences. That the tools I saw that the first time on a conference, and that's actually you don't need a login. It's just you go on that page, nothing is stored actually.
I mean the QR code is the login, right? Because it like reserves locality.
The code. Actually the code. It's the way. So it's kind of cool.
Nice.
And then we can do something like word cloud. So there are several things we can do in order to connect better with you, and that is cool. Good. I actually need to hop off. See you everyone.
Same.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Adrian. Yes, I will wrap up. So we covered the refactoring FM survey. If you want to participate, there's a link in the chat. I'll also add it to the show notes later. If you want, you can participate in the lead dev survey about engineering metrics. If you want a generic sort of checklist about what to do, how to go about continuous delivery, you can go to minimum3.org/journey. That's the continuous integration stuff, the testing stuff primarily that I showed you. If you want to check out my 5-day challenge, if you're a leader or if you're involved in planning in some way, you can check out the 5-day challenge on planning accuracy to sort of try your own comfort level and resistance to sort of course correcting the plan midway through the sprint, especially if your sprints are never on time and nobody cancels them, then this is a great opportunity for you to get some, at least a grounding reality check about your own accuracy, about your own estimates. And for proxies for continuous delivery, I would say focus on release planning and designing with your team. These are extreme programming practices. I have a follow-up talk recording coming up from the How to Web conference. I don't have that yet, so I didn't present it. And if you want to check out my talk from...
I actually need to go. Goodbye.
StripeCon. Ciao, Adrian. If you want to check out my... Yes, if you want to check out my talk from StripeCon, you can watch Denis's talk from StripeCon. Kaloyan, thank you so much for dropping the link. We had a very good production crew. I had a lot of fun preparing the presentation. It was here in the Ljubljana Castle. So that was my first conference after COVID. So I was really excited to go there. And it's a little bit interactive. It targets small to medium businesses, combining ideas from value-based pricing or outcome-based pricing opposed to hourly billing, and continuous delivery with agency-style products, and how basically your entire value proposition as an agency depends on how reliable are you, how risky is it to work with you, how burnt out is the team. When you're signing a contract and it relies on some kind of estimate, like what is the risk factor of that estimate? Is there does the team have a track record of accurately deploying, delivering on their promises, or are you speculating? And then, is the speculation covered in the price? If you were wrong, you should still be making a profit. Right? So I always say software engineers should be very good poker players, and not in the Scrum kind of way. The actual game. Okay. So thank you so much for being with us live here today. As always, the recording will be available on LinkedIn and YouTube. We'll have a Halloween special for you next week. We're just gonna go over some project management horror stories from our very, very far past. Things that went wrong, toxic issues, micromanagement, things like that. Andrea, hello. I met Andrea at How to Web for mentoring. Yeah, it's great to see you. Thanks for chiming in live. Yes, and we do have some guests lined up. We're gonna start with interviews next week to see who's gonna be our first guest after the Halloween special. So there's that. You can find us on YouTube and LinkedIn. The best way to connect with us is on LinkedIn. So it's Adrian Stanek and Denis Chahuk. And yeah, see you soon. Thank you for being with us. I'll sign you off with some elevator music. Ciao.
bye.